This morning, Invest 90L is sitting off Florida's Gulf Coast, and it is causing a mess.
In the past 24 hours, parts of South Florida soaked by several inches of rain, and we could get another 6+ inches by Saturday.
Yeah, we got that hose of moisture continuing to drench the Sunshine State. You got a lot more on the horizon. We got the flood alerts that are up for more travel trouble expected, and that's going to stay with us over the next several days.
This is America's Morning Headquarters. I'm meteorologist Stephanie Abrams alongside meteorologist Jordan Steele and Lynette Charles. And Lynette, we've already seen flooding and record rainfall in Florida, and there is a lot more to come.
There sure is. We're going to be dealing with some tropical downpours.
Seen record rainfall yesterday in Sarasota. We saw 3 inches an hour, over 3 inches an hour in some spots, and it's thanks to this juicy fetch of tropical moisture that's coming right up into Florida. You can see it right there. It's going to be like that for the next several days. So let's talk about this flood that. Remember that we do have sandy soil in Florida, and so that drains relatively quickly, but this is too much rain too fast. High pressure coming around. This is our invest that the National Hurricane Center is watching, and it doesn't have a great chance of developing, but it is still a piece of energy that will make things unstable in the atmosphere along with this boundary, and that can squeeze even more moisture out of the atmosphere. It's kind of like if you gave a sponge to a kid, you're like, wring this out. You know, the kid like squeezes it, and then you get it and you go, and you get all the moisture out. That's what those two entities are going to be doing for us here. Right now, you can see it central all the way down to South Florida. You are feeling it out there. I can tell you that much here. And here's a look at how much water is in the atmosphere. When we talk about, our precipitable water, when you have 2 inches or more, that is extreme. And that's what we have in some areas, 2.5 inches of precipitable water. And that's how much you could squeeze right out of the atmosphere instantaneously. And that's going to cause some flooding. Thanks to Jillian for that, our weather producer, throwing that in to kind of explain. I know 2 inches might not sound like a lot, but it is when you look at that, just to give you an idea of how juicy this is. It's not like you need precipitable water is at 5, 6, 7, 10 inches. 2 inches is a big deal. Saturday, it'll start to kind of slow down, as Jordan was showing you there. But we could see another 1.5 feet of rain. More records could be broken here. And this is great news because the drought has been getting worse here into Central and South Florida. And there is that flood threat that is lasting all the way into Saturday morning. We, of course, have live coverage here coming up within the next hour. Now, we do have sandy soil in Florida, which is good because it drains. But don't forget that you're getting a lot of it very quickly. And we also have a lot of urban areas, too, which means that it's going to run off with the concrete. But with these intense rainfalls, even with the sandy soil, it can cause flash flooding because you can't shove it in fast enough. You've all seen that with a drain, like in your shower. It only goes down so fast, right? So that's an issue. And then, of course, you get major runoff where we have all this concrete, all this development that we've been seeing here. And remember, it only takes 6 inches of fast-moving water to knock you off your feet. 2 feet of swiftly moving water can float and move a car, Lynette. And we could see that.
Exactly. Yeah, we sure can. And
we appreciate you staying with us here on America's Morning Headquarters. All eyes are on Florida after torrential downpours dampened the Sunshine State. I mean, look at these totals here. We had record rainfall yesterday, more than ½ a foot falling in parts of South Florida in just the last 24 hours. And guess what? More is to come. Some spots could see double digits when all is said and done. And this is all thanks to moisture that's basically coming up from the west to the east across the state. And it's all originating in the tropics. And Jordan, there's actually a little entity, a tropical entity, that's helping squeeze even more out.
Yeah, which makes conditions worse for.
With those storms coming in at night are less than ideal. Speaking of storms, we have an area here, an invest 90L. They go 90 to 99. L means Atlantic, and then they just start back over 90L. And so what this means is they can put a little more attention on it. Right now it's moving east-northeast at 14. This is helping enhance some of the rain over Florida. The question is, once it gets over into the southeast coast, will it develop into our first name system, which is Alberto? Right now, the percentage of development is not huge, but we do see a low pressure, and it will be interesting to see if the NHC calls this or not. There's your low pressure. Is it fully tropical? That's something to be discussed as well. Is it considered subtropical? So that is something that we will continue to watch. But regardless of all of that, since that won't have really that many impacts on us, it's already impacting us right now without a name. And this is something to remember for the tropical season. You don't need a named storm in order to get heavy rainfall. This is helping enhance some of that moisture that's coming up. So there's your invest. We have another area to watch. This one could actually be quite interesting for us here as we head into next week. And our sea surface temperatures are not firing up yet, but they are very, very warm. We're talking 80s and 90s here. So watch this area as we go over time. This is the European model, and it looks like my computer is seizing up on me. Let's go. Come on. Let's go. Let's go. Well, what's going to happen with this is this has the potential to intensify and potentially, there we go. The Euro, did you see how quickly that had it intensifying? So that potentially could also be Alberto as it comes towards the coast. And Lynette, this is a GFS. Again, you can see that energy next week. Do we have our first, maybe second name system?
We'll continue to watch that.
This morning, Invest 90L is sitting off Florida's Gulf Coast, and this thing is causing quite the mess over the state.
It sure is. In the past 24 hours, parts of South Florida soaked by several inches of rain, and we could get another 6+ inches by Saturday.
It's unreal.
Yeah.
Unreal.
I mean, it's hard. It's like, what?
Keeps coming.
Yeah.
We've got a hose of moisture basically pointed right at the state, drenching the southern edge of the peninsula. Flood alerts up, more travel trouble expected over the next several days. Just know that's not going anywhere anytime soon.
No, it is not. This is America's Morning Headquarters. I'm meteorologist Stephanie Abrams alongside meteorologist Jordan Steele and Lynette Charles. And Lynette, we already saw flooding yesterday. We saw record rainfall, especially on the west coast of Florida. There's going to be a lot more of it today.
Exactly. So started yesterday, 24 hours dealing with the tropical.
It is not at all, and the reason it's not budging is because of this. Do you see all that red? That is a juicy atmosphere, a persistent, deep flow of moisture going right into Florida, and it's going to persist for the next few days. And we have energy in the atmosphere that's helping squeeze it all out. It's equivalent to if you give a kid a sponge and you say, hey, squeeze this out, and say, you know, your 8, 9, 10-year-old, they squeeze the sponge, they get some moisture out. But with this area invest and this boundary, that's an adult squeezing the sponge and getting almost every drop out. Though you do want your kids, you know, you try to let them do things, and sometimes it's so hard to be patient in there and be like, squeeze it harder, please, you know, type of a thing. Jordan, I know you can relate to that. You ask them to do something, and woof, sometimes it's hard to be patient. High pressure helping bring all this moisture up. And you're going to have to be really patient in Florida for that sunshine to come back, because it's really not going to be until the weekend when we will see it. And if you look at our precipitable water, we are at the 2-inch or more range here, 2.5, 3 in some cases. And that means that you could get a lot of moisture out of the water versus if it was just kind of in the greens and the yellows. So there is a lot out there from central down into South Florida for our Wednesday, our Thursday. As I said, it's going to take a lot of patience here into our Friday. Things start improving on Saturday. You see that precipitable water number drop off a little bit. So that is a positive. The negative is we are going to get a foot, maybe 1.5 feet of rain. We do have sandy soil here, so it can drain quickly. But too much too fast is going to lead to flooding. The one silver lining is the drought has been expanding, and the heavy rain is going to go right over those drought areas. But that flooding is going to be a problem on both coasts all the way through our Saturday morning. And don't forget, the water does go through the sandy soil, as I was mentioning, very quickly. But those rainfall rates at 2, 3+ inches an hour means that you're going to see flooding. And then you'll also have all the concrete here, which that means that a lot more water is going to be running off and not absorbing. Lynette, 6 inches of flowing water can knock you off your feet, and you only need about 2 feet to float and move a car.
Yeah, and like you said,
it's going to be a mess yet again in Florida yesterday. Major delays at the airports there, major issues on the road. Sarasota, the water was halfway up the wheel of the well. The well wheel? What am I trying to say here? The wheel well, the well wheel. The wheel, halfway up the wheel. Let's go with that. Miami issues yesterday. Fort Lauderdale will see more of that again today. So it's going to be, if you're driving and or flying, it will be nonstop rain today. And we expect more flooding because of those rainfall rates. And this is going to be an all-day affair for us right now over Fort Myers. Bad situation there as well. And this, we have already had a lot of rainfall, and now we're getting more on the same areas. So that's just going to exacerbate the situation for us. Orlando, we're pretty okay. The heaviest stuff is really kind of south of Central Florida. So I think you'll have a better chance flying out of Orlando or north of there. And speaking of north of there, we could see some storms, a little piece of energy here today into Minneapolis, St. Cloud. It's going to be hot too. Mid to upper 80s for some of us here, 10, even 20 degrees above average. So Minneapolis, you could see some problems there. And there's a lot of connecting flights through Minneapolis too, Jordan. So that could delay you even if you're not going anywhere near the Midwest.
You know how nice that airport is?
Feeling the forecast in boring Oregon. And I'll tell you what, the weather is going to be kind of boring this weekend if you want to get outside. We do have a great day on Friday with the sunshine, but look at the rain on our Saturday and Sunday and those temperatures in the 60s. Oh, it makes you want to do that, doesn't it? Well, that's what one of the newest characters from Inside Out 2 does. This is ennui, which is the French word for boredom. Constantly on her phone. You can see it in her hand there. And she actually uses an app on her phone to get her commands to the emotions console. And Ennui's main job is to keep Riley away from things that aren't worth her time and energy, which does include her parents. I'm sure a lot of you out there can relate to that. She also helps her be apathetic when talking to the cool kids so that she doesn't look too eager. And I'll tell you what, I'm very eager for the sun to come back here into boring Oregon. Now, no matter where you live, the entire family can get all the feels when Ennui and the rest of the emotions hit theaters on Friday. What do you say we get in line and head to the movie? Joy, lead the way for us. Hey!
Come on.
Woo!
Hey! Hey!
Order, which is due in part to this, our Invest 90L. So the Invest, they go from 90 to 99. So the next one will be 91, then 92, and so on. The L means Atlantic. Once they get to 99, they just restart. Never have we had 9 Invests at one time, or even 5, 6 Invests at one time. So there's not an issue with the numbers. This has a 20% chance of development over the next 7 days as it crosses Florida, and a better chance of development off the southeast coast. Here's the thing. It doesn't really matter if this thing gets named or doesn't get named off the southeast coast because it's already causing impacts over Florida. It's giving us that little extra amount of lift. Kind of like if you give a little kid a sponge, it's wet, you're like, here, wring this out. The kid goes, Rant. And then this is like if you have an adult wring the sponge out. The low pressure, the front, that is like really stringing the moisture out. And so that's why it doesn't matter that it's not named because it's still bringing huge impacts to Florida right now with this stream of moisture coming up from the tropics. Watch this piece of energy. You'll see it will bundle up here. The low pressure, the pressure does lower, I should say. But again, whether this gets named or doesn't get named won't really affect us as it is meant to go out to sea. What it will impact are the rainfall totals here in Florida, giving that extra little muscle to the atmosphere to squeeze some more out. Well, we have an area to watch here and a new area to watch here around Mexico. And you can see this little bundle of energy. And what we're going to watch is as we get into next week, it moving potentially into Mexico or Texas. Very warm water temperatures and potentially some conducive winds in the upper levels to allow this to develop. Watch as we go into on Monday. You see it's getting more intense. And then Tuesday, could we have Alberto or maybe our second name storm, which is Beryl? We will see the GFS also picking up on this and showing that energy making its way towards Mexico. There we go again Monday and into our Tuesday, getting a little more intense and pulling ashore. And we do have that threat for heavy rain. And a lot of times this year, these things can get named right before landfall. But let's go back to where all the action is right now, and that is in Florida with national correspondent Justin Michaels. Justin, well, this morning we've got an Invest, as you can see, over in the Gulf Coast, and it is causing a mess of Florida, even though it's not even named yet.
It sure is. And in the past 24 hours, parts of South Florida soaked by several inches of rain, and we could get another 6+ inches by Saturday.
6+, I mean, 1.5. It's absurd.
So we've got this hose of moisture continuing to drench all of you in the Sunshine State. Flood alerts are up. More travel trouble expected. This is going to stick around for the next several days.
This is America's Morning Headquarters. I'm meteorologist Stephanie Abrams alongside meteorologist Jordan Steele and Lynette Charles. And Lynette, we already saw the flooding yesterday. We saw several places with record rain. Say that 3 times fast, right?
Exactly. We've been dealing with those tropical downpours, just swamp.
Naples, Alligator Alley, it is going to be rough. So what is causing all of this mess? Well, there's a couple things, and one of that, look at this fetch coming up from the Caribbean over Florida that is persistent, it is deep, and it's not going anywhere anytime soon. So that means we're going to see more robust thunderstorms. We also have a little Invest in the atmosphere that gives us some lift. We have a front in the atmosphere that gives us some lift. And I've been saying all morning, this type of moisture is if you put a sponge in the water You give it to your kid, you're like, wring that out. You know, when you give your kid, like, put your socks on, everything's a little slower, it's not as intense. This is like when the adult puts a sponge in and just, boom, wrings it out really tight and strong. And these are the adult hands. There's your invest, there's your front, and there's all this moisture. Notice our colors are orange and red, so there's a lot that we can actually squeeze out of the atmosphere. And we are seeing that from central all the way down into South Florida. And notice, we are at precipitable water 2 inches or more, which is extreme. I know 2 inches might not sound like a lot, but it is when you're talking about your precipitable water amounts and why we've seen record rainfall, and why we've seen the flooding, and why we're going to see more of it. Because now we have saturated grounds and more rain on top of it. The flow continues from west to east. Notice on Saturday, the colors do change a bit. It gets a little bit better as we head into our Saturday for us. Sunday is even better. But until we get to that, very heavy rainfall. This is kind of good because it is going over some of the driest parts of Florida, as we have seen that drought expand. But it's not good because it's going to cause flooding. So it's kind of, you know, a two-pronged thing here, where you're going to help the drought, but it's going to probably cause some damage. Now, here in Florida, we do have sandy soil, so the water can go through it very quickly. But when you have rainfall rates at over 3 inches an hour, even 2 inches an hour, this sandy soil can't even handle that. So you do get flooding. And then there's been so much development, especially in South Florida. So that allows all the rain and water to run off. Speaking of running water, 6 inches of moving water can knock you off your feet. And Lynette, it only takes 2 feet to float and move a car.
All right, thanks, Steph.
For some of those areas, it is active across South Florida. Let's get you out.
Gentlemen, picture this. A sprawling system connecting public walking and bike trails. It's called the Great American Rail Trail. Stretches more than 3,700 miles from coast to coast.
I was like, you don't even have to picture it. It's right there. You can see it. Yeah, it's really cool. Joining us for more on the progress of the National Trail is Ryan Chow, is president of the Rails to Trails Conservancy. We're so excited to have you here because this is such a huge project. It's not completely finished yet, but you did just mark a big milestone. What was that?
Yeah, great to be with you.
Because, you know, roughly 50 million people are within 50 miles of that route, which is so important. But I want to hear from you. Why do you think it's so important for Americans to have easy access to outdoor spaces like this?
Ask you about that. When this is completely finished, maybe you can tell us when that's expected. Will you literally be able to go nonstop from the start of it all the way to the finish and vice versa?
You sure will, yeah.
We manage, you know, from a state to state level, like whether you're allowed to use e-bikes on these trails or anything like that?
You know,
are there plans for other great trails, you know, going north through the south, like along the I-10 corridor, or maybe even north to south?
You know, many of those are
really cool. We love it, Ryan.
Hopefully there's cool campsites you could find along the way as
not
well
too far
through a long
off.
journey.
Exactly.
Ryan Chow, thank you so much for your time. President of Rails to Trails Conservancy. We appreciate your time.
Lynette, I know that you have a dog. You like to be outside and do the walking. I mean, could you ever fathom doing that entire trail, walking or biking?
There's going to be people that are going to do it.
I mean, it sounds
busy right now in Florida. We need to get to some breaking news that we have for you about some of the rainfall rates that we are going to see, thanks in part to this invest that we're seeing. This is 90L. The invests go from 90 to 99 and then restart. We've never had 4, 5, 6 invests, so you don't have to worry about the numbers overlapping. L means for the Atlantic. This right now, 20% chance of development over the next 7 days as it moves off the southeast coast. If it develops there, Alberto is the first name. Beryl is the second. Do we have a chance to have our first 2 named storms coming up this week and next? I'm going to show you. Here is that invest. You can see that counterclockwise spin here, and that is doing already a lot of work on Florida. It is wringing out tons of moisture in the atmosphere, and so we don't really care, I want to say, if it becomes Alberto off the southeast coast, because it's causing the damage now even without a name. And you can see all the rain that's been coming in. And these are the numbers I want to tell you about just in. They mesoed the area to tell us that it's looking like we could have localized areas of 6+ totals. And then also this rainfall rates 2 to 4 inches an hour. Yesterday, Sarasota had over a 3-inch rainfall rate in 1 hour between 7 and 8. It hasn't been that heavy since 1972. It's been a long time since we've seen a rainfall rate over 3 inches an hour. But there's your invest. There's your boundary. That is really squeezing all the juice out of the atmosphere. This has the potential to tighten up and maybe become something. I know the chances are low, but we just wanted to let you know. Very heavy rain in Florida. I'm going to skip through this to get to this other area to watch. Down here around Mexico, only 20% chance. But as we go into next week, there is the potential that this could also tighten up and be a named storm here into Mexico or perhaps into Texas. There it is for you Monday into Tuesday. Keep a close eye on this. Both models are now really kind of eyeing in on that situation. But before we get to that, we've got to get back to Florida with national correspondent Justin Michaels, who's joining us live from